John 11, straight off the bat, Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. Yep.
Yep, dear friend.
Did the disciples know him? Or
Yeah.
They all knew him, yeah?
Yeah. They probably would have stayed at his place regularly. Whenever he came into town, basically. His house was near...
Wasn't Bethany in the Mount of Olives or something?
Yes, literally just next ridge over from the Mount of Olives. So we're talking about 4 or 5 kilometres at the most from the temple. So Lazarus this whole area was well known as basically like the outer suburbs of Jerusalem.
Yep.
Okay, that'll help us when we go through the story.
Yep. Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Brother Lazarus sent a message to Jesus, text message. Excuse me, Jesus, your dear friend is very sick. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. There's a prediction.
It is. And notice it doesn't say Lazarus. It says Lazarus' sickness will not end in death.
Yes.
It doesn't say Lazarus won't die.
Yep.
So I think for us, there are times when we cling to a promise that it will not end in death.
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't mean it won't go through death. Our promises, whether that's literal death or a death of a dream or death of our finances or whatever, the point is Jesus is the power. We're going to see this. Jesus is the resurrection and the life in this passage.
Wow.
Doesn't mean that we won't go through things.
Yep.
But it does mean if we stay close to Jesus, it won't ever end in death.
Do you mean that this story has levels?
Levels. Like it.
Do you mean that lots of these stories
Lots
have
of these
levels?
stories have nuance
That's
and
something
levels.
Jeannie would say. Do
Yeah,
you mean that this is not
She's
just pointing
so
to
good with her
Lazarus
questions.
getting raised from the dead?
Yes, that's right. It's more than that.
So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. There's a statement.
So Jesus has left Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He's crossed over the Jordan River. He's out in the bush about a day's journey away. So imagine they've sent, Lazarus is getting close to death. They send word. It takes a day to get there. He stays where he is for 2 more days because they would have been expecting him back late the next day.
Yep.
They sent a day there, day's journey there, day's journey back. That day comes, Lazarus dies. Another day comes, Lazarus is still dead. Finally, we're going to see Jesus comes back. But it's
a normal person
days.
would be second-guessing himself right now.
Yes, that's right.
And the disciples are like going, hey,
We're
Rabbi,
not going back there.
what's going? But they're like, yeah, but his disciples rejected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. You going there again?
Remember what happened at the end? They're basically saying, remember what happened at the end of chapter 9?
Yeah.
They trying to stone you. You sure you want to go back there? You had to run for your life back then. Want to go back to chapter 9, Jesus?
And here's another multi-leveled statement. There are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light.
Yes.
That's John doing his thing again, isn't it?
Yeah, he's bringing the whole metaphors that he does. Jesus is being cryptic again.
Then he
about
said,
light
our
again.
friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up.
Another metaphor, fallen asleep. And they say, Lord, don't worry about it. If he's sleeping, they're just thinking about themselves and ending up getting stoned again. He'll be right. He'll get better if he's just sleeping.
See, at the start, before we started this podcast, I was going to ask, didn't the disciples, hadn't they studied the Torah? Or couldn't they see what was coming? But then this is all so confusing. How would they have known?
Yes, you realise.
Jesus is throwing parables and metaphors and double-layered meanings, and these guys are fishermen. And
they're just ordinary. These guys haven't been to Torah school.
I was like, why didn't they get it?
Yeah. Jesus hasn't, these guys are unlearned in the ways of Torah.
Isn't there a saying the best learned lessons come hard or something? The things that you remember, you have to go through things to get the lesson down deep. And I think Jesus did that a lot.
He did that.
Yeah.
Jesus would often deliberately hide truth below the surface.
Yeah.
And this is not just Jesus doing this. It was a common principle for Pharisees. We're used to people just giving us the answers.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at this because it takes time and effort, not just to, you ask me a question, I just give the answer. But a good rabbi, a rabbi that would do the way they used to do it, you'd ask me a question and I'd just drip feed, like Jesus did, drip feed a little confusing thought back to you that kind of forces you to dig below the surface, because the best learned answers are the ones we learn ourselves. So obviously we haven't got a lot of time to do that on a podcast. We haven't, these podcasts are long enough, but that's that's why Jesus was deliberately confusing at times, because he was forcing people to dig a little bit deeper themselves.
I'm thinking like life lessons that I've learned, and sometimes I haven't learned them at the time. It might have been a year or two later. I've gone looking back on a situation saying that was really, well, a lot of cases, that was really God. Sometimes I'd been slapped in the face with bad luck and it took me out of a situation that I was leading into sinfulness. And at the time I was like, this sucks. And then a couple of years later I've gone, geez, that was really sort of...
That was the hand of God.
The hand of God just changing my situation.
Yeah, that's so true, Kenny.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what's going on here.
All right, Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now you will really believe. Come, let's go and see him. Has this one been done on The Chosen?
No, not yet. It might be. Well, I haven't watched all of season 4. I'd be surprised. Actually, I've got a vague feeling it might happen at the end of season 4. I haven't watched all of season 4 yet.
Is this a bit of a joke? Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too and die with Jesus.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, if we have to go back there, we're all going to die. Yeah. Yep.
When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 smelly days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. So Martha's gone out to meet Jesus, but Mary stayed in the house because she's a little bit ticked off, or...
Yeah, she's pretty disappointed. We'll see that in a moment. Yep, we'll see that. She's pretty disappointed with Jesus. Yep.
Martha said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask.
So remember previously, Martha was kind of the one that was pointed out as being the busy in the kitchen kind of deal. In this
Mary and Martha.
In this one, Martha's actually the one who's responded more quickly. Lord, I'm sad, but I still trust you. Mary's the one who's struggling more with it this time around.
That's good. They swapped it around.
They kind of swapped a little bit, yeah. They're both, neither of them's wrong. They're just humans. They have good moments and they have not so good moments.
We all get certain things and fail on other things.
That's right.
And you get another chance.
You do get another chance to go around the mountain. You have another chance to pass the test. And look, I feel for Mary and Martha. I mean, the grief they sent for Jesus, they've seen Jesus do miracles, and their brother, their loved brother, who Jesus loves a lot, has a good relationship with Lazarus, has died. I can feel their pain.
In verse 25, Jesus does another multi-layered speech.
Yes.
I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. Do you believe this, Martha?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
he's now
Lord,
lifting off natural death to spiritual death.
Yeah.
He's lifted up a level. And Jesus does a lot of this in John's gospel. He starts with the natural. John 4, the woman at the well.
Yeah.
And he takes it from a natural conversation about living natural water, turns it into spiritual living water. Jesus often starts in the natural and raises to the spiritual. He's talking here, first of all, about a dead man.
Yeah.
And he's going to start talking about spiritual life.
Gosh. I'm going back to my my cinema experience with Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. Was this all foreplanned?
Yeah, well, God's in his infinite knowledge.
Did God in his infinite knowledge know that Lazarus would die and be used for the glory and for Jesus to teach?
Yep, you got it. What we don't say is don't say God caused Lazarus to get sick, but God's infinite foreknowledge is he knows that stuff happens because of general sin in the world.
Yep.
And he will still redeem it and use it for his purpose, for his glory, like you said. That's what Jesus said to the disciples. This happened that the glory of God would be revealed.
Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. Why was that?
Probably to avoid the crowds, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Oh, so Martha returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus's grave to weep, so they followed her there. So we're talking about like families and relatives and friends.
Relatives, friends, yes. Yeah. And there's quite a following, it would appear.
Yeah.
And that leads scholars to think Lazarus was probably quite an influential man in the area. The fact that he's near Jerusalem, living in farmland, it's probably quite it's like on the outskirts of the Dead Sea area here, but it was a lot of it's even today, a lot of vineyards and things like that.
Yeah.
So he probably maybe he was supplying wine. Had a business. A lot of scholars think maybe he had a business supplying wine or olives or something like that to Jerusalem.
Did they have funerals still? Or is this like the funeral?
This is called, when they're all sitting in the house, it's called sitting Shiva.
Oh.
The Jews sit alongside someone, and not just Jews do that. Other Arab cultures do that. They'll sit with the person. You come in and you pay respects. The person who's lost a loved one sits there, and processions of people come and give gifts and pay their respects.
At my daughter's grandfather's funeral.
What nationality was that?
Russian Orthodox.
So that would be a similar thing.
Yeah.
So yes, it has its roots in this, so Jewish practice or Arab practice. But the Jewish practice is called sitting Shiva. You just sit with people. And there's a time of grieving. You come and you just console.
And I remember
them.
they all walked
there.
past his wife. And
yes, that's right. So that's has its roots in this. So when Job's three friends, they're sitting Shiva with Job as he's grieving.
Right.
Okay, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there. And the idea is you sit there and you need it, you need it. If you're not, it's just your presence.
Yeah.
That's what's going on here. And so there's a crowd of friends and relatives and so on that are coming and going to follow Mary as she heads out. And it says, they're assuming she's going to the grave. Normally you stay in your home, but when she gets up and goes, they assume they follow her because they think she's going to the grave.
Verse 32, when Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled.
I always find that a fascinating statement. Why would Jesus, who knows he's on a mission to heal Lazarus, where's the anger?
I know.
Where is the anger directed? What do you think, Kenny?
At their unbelief. But why would they have cause to?
I don't think it's directed at their unbelief.
What do you think?
I think it's directed at death.
Oh.
I think Jesus is angry at death.
And the pain that death
sin
causes.
And the pain that death causes. He is on a mission to defeat death. So death represents sin, the devil's work in the world. So for this purpose was the Son of God manifest. He says of himself to defeat the works of the evil one. That's in John somewhere. So he is on a mission here, and he's picking a fight with death, and he's about to go toe to toe with. He's been going toe to toe with the Pharisees and their kingdom values.
Yep.
Now he's going to go toe to toe with the power behind the Pharisees, the death, the kingdom of darkness. That's what he's at. And that deep anger wells up inside him, and he's troubled. Because you'd think Jesus would go. Naturally, you go, Mary, don't worry about it. Yeah. Just wait 5 minutes.
It's all pre-planned.
It's all pre-planned. Five minutes from now, you're going to be hugging Lazarus. It's all cool. Why would Jesus not do that? Because he is coming toe-to-toe with death here.
Is that why he weeps?
Yes. He's weeping because he sees the power that death has to destroy.
Is this the verse where it just...
Jesus wept.
Jesus
John
wept?
8, 34. 35.
Oh, no, 35.
John 8, 35.
That's
Sorry,
it. It's
John 11,
verse.
35. Jesus wept.
And Jesus wept.
Shortest, well, they say it's the shortest verse in the Bible. It is probably the shortest verse. I'm not sure about in the different texts, but there's one in Nehemiah that might be slightly shorter, just the number of characters, but it's 2 words. Jesus wept in this verse. And why is he weeping? Because one, he's picking a fight. He's angry at death, and he's weeping with compassion because he sees the pain and anguish that death causes. Yeah. But when it says he's angry,
and that you can see that in real life. You can see that pain and anguish in people that are still alive, but they look like
death. Exactly, Kenny. Yeah. Yep.
The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, "This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" How many people would have taken the rolled stone away from a tomb?
A few.
Yep.
Yeah, a few. It's assuming it's like the round tombstone. It'd take a few in to roll it back. Yep. It's kind of like rolling it up a hill a bit. So there's a bit of weight in it.
So this is a massive statement in verse 41 and 42. "Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me."
Yeah. So Jesus is doing, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is doing a lot of signs. There are a lot of signs deliberately that John puts in there, and they calls them signs. They're miracles, but they calls them signs to point to who Jesus is.
Yep.
And this is going to be one of the final ones. Is point to his as the author, the victor over death.
Yep.
And he's saying this. He's actually declaring before he does the raising of Lazarus, so that people hear him in tune with the Father, and they go, he's the one who raised, in the name of the Father, raised Lazarus from the dead. So it's a public declaration. And Jesus, remember, back to being angry here, the word anger here, the picture, I think from memory, the Greek word that's used is like a bull snorting about to charge.
Oh, okay.
Can you picture that?
Yeah.
Right. That's what Jesus is doing with death. He's picking a fight. He's coming.
I can also
he's about
picture
to
a
charge.
normal bloke who's going to fight, and he's like,
yeah, exactly. He's got exactly, and he's all the while death is about to get charged down by this snorting bull.
wow.
Death is about to be defeated. He's going to be run over.
This is kind of so
the
much more
snorting
than
bull.
I thought. I thought it was just a story, and I've always wondered why it took so long.
No, it's all intentional.
Yeah. Then Jesus shouted. Oh, did I do this? Yeah,
Not
Father,
yet.
thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of these people standing here. They will believe you sent me. Then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. His hands and feet bound in his grave clothes. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go.
Unwrap him and let him go.
Ooh.
So he waddles out, wrapped up in cloths. Unwrap him and let him go. And one of the things I love about that is Jesus brings Lazarus back from the dead, but then he expects other people to do the unwrapping.
In the chapters that I was meant to go, Jesus unwrapped himself.
Yes.
Didn't he? And his head thing.
Yes, the resurrection chapters. Yes, that's right. And he folded it up and left it there.
Yeah.
In this case, he's telling the disciples to get engaged, the people to get engaged. And I think there's a lesson for us in that. That's part of the job of the church. Jesus brings us back from death, but we're supposed to unwrap one another. To use that analogy, we've got to be great. We're basically in the process of taking death off us. The death clothes represent death.
That's right.
We come back to life, but we're still infected, and we're touched by the power of death and hurt and trauma and pain from our lives.
And you need to unwrap things.
We need to have
heal.
things unwrapped and to be healed, and that's the job of Jesus. Says, "I've done my part. Now you, as a body, unwrap the trauma off one another graciously." That's why Jesus is so anti the Pharisees, because they're not doing any unwrapping of trauma. They're just re-traumatizing in the name of religion.
Yep.
And how often has Christians done that? We've re-traumatized in the name of God rather than removed trauma because we represent who Jesus is.
And everyone unwraps at a different time in life and stuff.
Yep, that's right.
I was thinking, try and tell a 20-year-old something that he needs to unwrap something.
Yeah,
I go, no,
takes time.
I'm keeping these bandages on.
Yep, that's right.
So some people believed in Jesus then, but some went and dobbed to the Pharisees and told him what he'd done.
And now they've got a problem on their hand. This is just down the road in Jerusalem. And he's gone up, he's up a level from healing a blind man. That was one thing.
Yeah.
Now he's raised a dead man. We've got a real problem on our hands. Look at what they say. If we allow this, verse 40, if we allow this to go on, soon everyone's going to believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy our temple and our nation, because they're afraid that if everyone turns to him as Messiah, it's going to start an uprising. The Romans are going to have a gut full of it, and they're just going to destroy the whole thing. That's what they're worried about.
Wow.
Guess what? That ultimately happened 40 years after this, but that's what they're worried about.
Caiaphas, is he one of the people that Jesus went to get judged? No.
Yes. Caiaphas. Sorry, Caiaphas. Yes, he's one of the high. Yeah, he's the high priest. Yeah. There's actually two high priests at this time. A nephew. I think it's a uncle and nephew. I think are both high priests at the same time. Yep.
And he's saying, you don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed.
Yeah. So what he's saying there is we're better off just killing Jesus.
Yep.
To save the whole nation, because if we don't kill Jesus, they're all going to turn to him. And we're going to have a riot on our hands, and the whole nation, the whole Jewish nation, is going to be destroyed by the Romans. So what we're better off doing is killing Jesus, and then the whole people will scatter. The whole revolution will stop, is what he's saying.
Wow. But verse 51, is that saying that it was a prophecy? He was led to prophesy this.
He's saying even though he thinks he's actually fulfilling God's plan by saying that.
I love it.
Because he thinks he's fulfilling God's plan by killing Jesus and rescuing the people. And John's sort of ribbing you in the ear and saying, actually, he really was fulfilling God's plan, but not the way he thought. He was actually prophesying that one would die for the nation. And guess what? That one really did. His name is Jesus. That's what John's doing. Yeah.
So from that time on, they began to plot Jesus' death. And as a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. he went to a place near the wilderness to the village of Ephraim and stayed there with his disciples.
Yeah, until the Jewish Passover. So some period of weeks or months or whatever, he stayed out of town until
Is the Passover a once-a-year thing?
Once-a-year thing, yep. And this is obviously the final Passover when he will ride in on the donkey, which we'll see, in the beginning of Passion Week. Yeah. So as well as that, because of this whole thing with I think we'll probably read it in the next chapter. We're not going to do that today. But because of this whole thing with Lazarus coming back from the dead, they come to realize, well, it's one thing to kill Jesus, but we've got a problem. This dude, Lazarus, everyone knows that something's happened there too. So what we'll do is we'll kill him as well. So they actually plotted to kill Lazarus. It says in the scriptures.
Wow. Did they?
No, there's no evidence of that one way or another. But they had a plot. It says they had a plot to kill him because they figured, well, he's the problem. Everyone's looking to him because he was dead. Now he's alive again. So if we kill him, that'll defeat the argument. So this is how like down the rabbit hole these guys are.
This is like true crime stories.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Well, we're done, Kenneth.
A lot to unpack. I'm as usual. I'm going away with knowledge and questions and
nice.
But I like after doing the podcast, I go and pray and talk to God.
Yeah.
And come to my. So I hope the podcasters out there remember to do that.
Amen.
Because this is the word of the Lord.
Yep, that's right. Keep asking questions of a text.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you for having me once again. I don't know how short that was.
That was...
but we did good.
We're under 2 hours.
I really enjoyed
the
fact that I didn't get to do research because I feel like I've done the research
in real time
during the podcast.
Great. Excellent. Well, that's it. John 7-11 is in the bag.